Good afternoon everyone, this is Zola and today we are going to be having a look at our first Mograph object, the cloner object, and as part of the breakdown of Mograph series. This series is going to be probably a lot of functionality. If you've ever watched any of my tutorials, you know that I kind of go by the teach man to fish kind of way of teaching, so I'm more teaching the techniques rather than physically saying let's look at this and then let's copy this. I have done a couple of those, like the Sky HD one for example, but I do prefer to teach in a kind of more this is what the program can do, and now go kind of play for yourself instead of just trying to copy other people's work. So like I said, this whole series is basically going to be about functionality, so it is going to be a lot of primitive shapes and how we can affect them, but you really need to use this as a springboard and then go on to how you can create some really cool stuff with it. So yeah, little introduction out of the way. So the cloner object. So the cloner object requires clones, funnily enough, and we're going to use a sphere. And we're going to drop the sphere into the clone, and if you watched the introduction video that I made last week, you probably have an idea of how this works already. We've got the object mode selected, which gives us these little handles here, but we're going to be affecting all this with the menu we have over here. So actually I'm just going to keep it in the bottom corner, and we're just going to run through the parameters and what the cloner object can do. It's actually very powerful. Just take a drink of water. Ah, lovely. It's quite warm today actually, so kind of sweating my beans off as I'm sat completely next to the window in full sunlight. So might need a bit of water to get through this one without fainting. So linear. By default the cloner object is set to linear, and we have 3 clones here. So whatever you have in here, it will clone 3 times. That's quite simple to understand. And then basically the Mograph object works in various ways. As you can see, we have linear, we have object, radial, and grid array. I'm going to stick with linear actually for now, and we're going to run down what all these functions are, and then we're going to go through the others and see what the differences are between them. So clones, this menu really only applies if you have more than one kind of object. So I'm going to leave this little section till later on when we do grid array, and you'll see why. Count, surprisingly enough, this is how many clones we are using. Quite simple really. Offset is how offset the whole string is from the axis. In this case it's on the y-axis. Once again, quite simple. And here we have mode, and we have 2 modes. We have endpoint and per step. Per step basically allows you to, as you go through each of these clones one by one, apply a transformation, scaling, and a rotation parameter. And so let's have a look at this. So at the moment we are increasing the size on the y-axis. You can offset these on the x-axis, which is the red arrow, and obviously on the Z as well. You can scale these up on the once again on every axis. You probably want to do that uniformly, although we kind of have a hot air balloon now. Interesting. There you go. If you're in need of making a hot air balloon, good way to do it. So that's that, and obviously we have the rotation, which I'll zoom in a bit here, just so you can see that these are then rotating. So we have the amount as well, so you can keyframe this. As you can see, all these have keyframes, are keyframeable, should I say, which means you can animate them, which is useful to know. So you could start out with, you know, scale of whatever, and then go upwards, or cloning them out by that. Now as I said, we have per step and we have endpoint. Endpoint is different in that the offset will be applied to the whole string, as it were. So if we put in a plus parameter 5000, that will be from the bottom to the top. That is 5000 centimeters in this case. And if we do this per step, you'll see that this is now changed to 357. So it's just displaying. So once again, these are just 357 apart. If you change it to endpoint, it's 5000 from top to bottom. So that's how that works. I'm going to leave this on per step. And here we have the step mode. Now the step mode allows us to do some really cool things. We can rotate these, we can bend it an axis, we can then bend that axis, and I think that's fairly self-explanatory. Here we have step mode single value, and obviously we have the size here, once again keyframe up or down, and we can also do cumulative. I always get that wrong. And this is just the, once again, this is just the all the parameters combined rather than a single value. So that's how that works. So fairly simple on the linear. Let's switch to radial. Is in much the same way as linear, apart from what you are basically doing is creating the clones in a circle. You can change the plane. I'm going to rush through this because it's actually fairly self-explanatory. You have the start angle, because you can start these. I'll put this on this plane, and so you can start them from 0 and work all the way up to 300 and even past 300, and then you can also offset this, spin it, and you can there's offset variation, but for that you have to have an offset. And then as you can see, you can kind of just offset these randomly as well. So that's radial. Once again, fairly simple. Grid array is cool. This allows you to basically create a field of clones, and by default we have a count 3 by 3 by 3, and we have 9 in each one, 9, 18, 27. And at the moment we have the form of cubic, as you can see they're forming a cube. Quite simple. We can put them in a sphere, and obviously this is not looking very sphere-like purely to the fact that we don't have very many clones. But if we crank this up, and as you can see, as the more clones you put in, the slower your viewport will render. So I'm going to render instances. That should speed things up a tiny bit. But yeah, so as you can see, it's basically made it in the shape of a cube, a circle, sorry, a sphere. And you also have cylinder, which is in much the same style. It's just going to create a cylinder-ish type thing. So it's just basically the way of distributing your clones. So that's grid array. Again, interesting. Now let's go to explain this now. This menu. So clones, we have iterate, random, blend, sort. So let's tick through these and we'll see they don't really do anything. And so we're probably wondering why that is. I'm going to switch this back to a cubic and go back to maybe 5 by 5 by 5. Okay. Apparently I've probably just do maybe not 100 but 1500 by 1500 by 1500. So there we go. So we have a nice field of cubes, a cube of circles. Confusing myself there. And for this clones thing to work, we will probably need to add another shape, because what the cloner does is, as you can see here, you can throw as many shapes as you want into this, and it will then randomize. So now we have 2 shapes in here, and let's get crazy. Let's add a third one. No expense spared on this tutorial. We'll put a cube in there, just because these are the main parametric objects. So as you can see, we have the same form maintained by our cloner, but this time we have 3 objects, and now this is where the clones field will come into place. So here we have iterate. If we randomize this, we'll see that the clones are now still in that same grid array and still 5 by 5 by 5, but now we have the shapes are randomized in their in the way these are set out. If we go to blend is I'll show you that last actually, and sort, basically I've probably picked the wrong shape to show sort, but basically you can sort them to have all squares. This works in it's a bit more complicated actually. You have to link it with an effector, and you have a black to white gradient, and for the black part of the gradient you would have maybe all cubes, and then for the white part of the gradient you would have circles, and basically by applying the gradient you can this would work best in a line as well. You would have basically all cubes and then all triangles and all circles afterwards, but that would be determined by the gradient which you set on this. But that's one for another day. I don't want to confuse you too much with this, so let's just forget about that for now. So yeah, blend. For me to show you blend, it will probably be easier for me to switch this to a linear, and I'm going to make a new clone object, as we've already messed around with that one far too much. Okay, so I'm going to increase the count here. We're going to put 0 on that, and we're going to spread them along the z-axis maybe. Maybe not that far, would be a little extreme. So here we have it, and I'm just going to pull this cube out for now, and I'm going to duplicate it. The thing you want to remember with the blend is, if you come into your structure menu for your objects, at the moment you will see nothing as it's still a primitive, but you have it will tell you how many points your object has, and this is really important to know if you want the blend to work properly. And I'm going to come out of that just for now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these two side by side, and I'm going to just change this one. I'm going to make it taller, thinner, more athletic, you might say. And I've got this little fat cube here, and I'm just going to leave that as is. So that's fine. And what we're going to do now, we're going to drop these both back into the cloner. And so, as you can see, at the moment we have we've just got iterate. I'm going to frame these, and so at the moment we just have these on iterate. But if I change it to blend, you'll see how the effector will now go from having the tall thin one to the short fat one, I guess, for lack of a better expression. And so basically what it does is it blends between them, and that's simple as it is. Now for this to work, your primitives need to be the same, or like I said, they need to have the same number of points, so check your structure menu for that. And that can be a nice way to achieve some morphing, although it's probably not the ideal way to use to do morphs in this, as there's things like, such as the morph tag, not a Mograph tag. It's around here somewhere, and I'm now determined to find it. Pose morph, no. So there you go, and I'm pretty sure there's a morph deformer there as well, and those two work in conjunction with one another. So that's how blend works, and note this also works with splines as well. So if you have maybe a cogwheel and a flower, as long as they have the same number of points, your cloner will be able to distinguish between them and morph between them, which also has large possibilities. You can do it with lights as well, different colour lights, so all kinds of fun stuff. So that's enough about that menu. Now underneath we have the fixed clone tick box, and we might wonder what fixed clone does. So once again, here I'm going to offset them into a little triangle, I guess. Bring our brand new cloner object in, and bring these three into there, and we're going to clone upwards. Now as you can see, as things stand, fixed clone is on, and what it has done is basically just use the axis of the cloner object to clone all these upwards. So despite the fact that these three are in a triangle, it's going to ignore that and just clone upwards like so. However, if I turn fixed clone off, you'll see that the objects actually maintain their distance. So that's quite interesting from each other. So that's the basic way of explaining that, and as we keep cloning upwards, you'll see that the objects are maintaining that distance from each other, whereas if I fixed clone, they'll all jump back onto the axis. So that's what fixed clone does. Also note, if you want to, I'll show you this now real quick, delete those two. Say that you want your, I'm going to turn the cloner off for now, you keyframe your shape moving around. So I'm going to do a very crude animation here. Certainly won't be winning any awards for that. So we've just got the circle kind of going on this bend, and then if I drop this into the cloner, we'll notice nothing's happening. Our original thing's moving, but you won't actually see that. As you can see, if I render, there's just the clones. However, if I turn fixed clone off, check this out. Woo! So that's another thing. If you're thinking of doing that, and if you're thinking of doing that, then and you want your object to animate and then the cloner to inherit that, make sure you've got fixed clone off. Because like I said, if not, it ignores all the things before it, and then your clones will just basically be fixed to whatever attributes you have in the effector. Last but not least, render instances. I'm going to explain that real quick. It's just basically the program will reference the original object, and although it will be generating geometry, that geometry is never actually there. You can't, without physically pressing C and changing this into even here we have the Mo instance objects, which we the instance objects which we mentioned last week. They're all referencing that original sphere, and if I undo that, turn render instances off, and then once again press C, you'll see this time it's actually convert each of these to a sphere, which is fine as we have 10 here, and that's not really demanding on our graphics card. But if we were taking maybe 1,000 spheres, then I would definitely recommend using render instances and just keeping that on. And that basically means that even though this circle is there, it isn't really, it's just being, well, it is there, but it's actually referencing all the information from the first one. So basically it will help with your viewport refresh rates. Okay, cool. Last but not least, you'll notice that I missed this earlier, and it's because I've got a little scene set up here. And what we basically have is a cloner field with a load of tiles. It says cube here, but they're actually really thin tiles. Let me just turn this back to cubic. Okay. So yeah, if I frame the selected object, so here we have all our tiles, and we just have a crude texture projected on these kind of hexagons. And if I bring my plane effector through here, you can find that in effector plane. Plane is the probably the easiest to understand of all the effectors, as it does exactly what it says on the tin. It's just a plane, and anything on this plane will just be affected by whatever parameters are ticked in the parameter menu. So right now I have flip 180, so all the clones will flip 180 degrees when they fall within, by default this will be on infinite, but when they fall within the sphere of my effector. So as I move this through, as you can see, they're basically just rotating 180 degrees, and that's as simple as that. So if I render this now, you'll see that even though these are actually rotating, have I got, turn that off, sorry, by default this will be off. So let's do that again, render, and as you can see, even though the tiles are rotating, the texture itself is still being projected onto these basically like it was literally being projected by a monitor or something, a projector. If I turn the fixed texture to straight, you'll notice now that the tiles are actually, as they rotate, the texture is rotating with them, and that's the easiest way I can explain it, really. By messing around with alternate X and Y, you can have a texture on each side, and I recommend you have a look at the reference documentation that comes with Cinema 4D, which is excellent, and just have a look at how to do that. It involves setting the front and back of two materials, basically. So that's that. Let's jump back into here, and we're going to go on to the very last function of the cloner, which is potentially also one of the most fun, and that's the object. So as soon as we tick object as the mode, lots of parameters disappear. We still have our fixed clone and all that stuff, but we just have an object field here, so it might get quite confusing. So I'm going to drop my sphere into there, and as you can see, nothing has happened. That's because what the object mode does is allows you to clone your clones, in this case the sphere, onto an object, basically. Hence the object mode. It's so intuitive, I know. So there's two ways of doing that. You can make your cloner a child, of the object you want to clone onto, and now we have our desired effect. We are cloning the clones onto the, on this case it's the vertices of the shape. The other way to do that is if you have two shapes, and this is quite interesting actually. The other way to do this is, I've probably bring this down somewhat so I don't get too much slowdown, but you can also drag the object into the parameter, and if you have the child, the object as a child of a parent, and you drag an object into the object field, this one will always take priority. So as you can see, all our clones now have jumped to here, so I'm going to undo that. Just thought I'd show you that, but this is the easiest way to remember it, I guess, whatever works for you. So let's have a look at some of the parameters. Right now we have the sphere appearing on the vertices. You can change this to edges, in which case the clones will appear along the edges, and as I crank my cloner up, where are we looking? Okay. No, sorry, I got confused there for a second. Polygon center, these will be around the, basically the distance from the middle of this this object. Let me just bring this out. Personally, I like dragging the object in here. It just makes it less confusing for me. Polygon center, we have the surface, which is just on random points of the surface, and we have the volume, which is random points inside as well. If I hide the original platonic, sorry. You can see these are appearing at random points within the volume of this object. So yeah, and here you can increase the count. Once again, let me hide this, and as you distribute more and more, you get more clones. It's as simple as that, really. And this is really cool for, like, if you have maybe let's bring in a figurine, and we can create a kind of little CG man. And at the moment we're just cloning around what appears to be his waist. But if we change this to edges, this is interesting. I've never actually experimented with this, but we've actually given him a nappy. So there's another piece of of motion graphics genius, really. If you want to give a nappy to one of your models, that's the way to go. So yeah, play around with it. Once again, you can mess about with having selections, and I'll show you how to make selections in the original one. The last thing is, I've been showing you how to clone. Please note also you can randomize then you can then affect, like I showed you once again, all this in the first one, but bring in a random effector, and you can randomize how these appear around. In this case, his waist. You can scale them out. You can change the scale. You know, this is nothing new. That looks like a particularly painful nappy now, but you get the idea. So once you have your objects cloned and distributed how you want them, just bring in an effector, and you can then affect. You can basically get these to move. I showed you once again how to do this last week. If we go to effector, go to noise, we can get these moving, and so on and so forth. And virtually all the effectors have different ways of animating the clones. So look into it, and hopefully you've learned some stuff. That was a quick overview of some of the possibilities of the Mograph cloner object, and like I said, I didn't even really touch on the functionality. You can add effectors to it, like I briefly showed you with this, and there's so much fun to be had here. I've just scratched the surface, but hopefully I've given you enough information so that you know how the cloner actually works now, and you can get your clones to appear in the way you want them to. So thanks for watching. Please check out the site, subscribe, follow me on the Twitter, and hopefully I'll see you next time for another Mograph lesson.